Okay, thank you very much. Good morning to Leticia Munguia, who's joining us today. She is a candidate in the 79th Assembly District race. Born in San Diego, daughter of immigrants from Mexico, grew up in Southeast San Diego County and attended local public schools. I need to take a deep breath here. Local public schools, City College, SDSU, and got a law degree at Michigan State. After graduation, worked for a spell at the San Diego County Alternate Public Defender's Office, and now is a business representative for ASME 36, which, for those who don't know, is a union of more than 55, I think, unions representing workers around Southern California. And you are endorsed in this race by a lot of people, but prominently by Lorena Gonzalez and Nora Vargas. So let me just start, I'll throw the mic to you. Let me ask you, why are you running in the 79th at this moment? And what do you think is the biggest issue in a district that's so spread out geographically and so diverse?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Matthew, for the opportunity to share my story. First and foremost, I just want to have a correction. I actually went to Thomas M. Cooley Law School in Lansing, Michigan.
Aha.
I think it's important that we make that correction on the record, everyone.
I apologize for getting that wrong. Thank you.
I was going to say very, very honored to have attended law school from one of our Supreme Court justices there in Michigan. The reason I'm running is a culmination of the work that I've done, not just as a community organizer, but as an advocate, an educational policy person that I've done the work in the field to try to improve the working conditions of many members of our working families in not just the Assembly District 79, but throughout San Diego County. I've been very lucky to be on the front lines advocating through this pandemic. Day one, we've been doing work to make sure that city resources and services for both the city of San Diego and the city of Coronado are uninterrupted to ensure that our residents have their trash picked up, the sewer lines working, and making sure that every single opportunity to have city resources are uninterrupted. And our members that I represent proudly every day have continued to do the work irregardless of the fact that a lot of folks are working at home. I'm very proud to represent workers in protecting their wages, hours, and working conditions as part of the work that I do day in and day out.
And what do you see as the biggest issue in the district?
Well, my three areas of focus, and have been since the day one when I decided to run for the Assembly in the 79th, is we need to ensure that there's access to testing and the vaccine, and we need to ensure that our communities have access to healthcare. I see that as one of my top priorities. Secondly, we need to refocus and reopen our economy. We need jobs. We need to have our tourism and hotel industry open up again once folks are vaccinated. We need our tourism to reopen. We have so many members of Unite Here Local 30 severely impacted. Over 5,000 of their members were laid off. That means all of our service industry downtown and across Coronado. We have folks who are at home wanting to go back to work, but for the fact that our tourism has not reopened. So I stand in solidarity with our local 30 Unite Here brothers and sisters who are ready to go back to work. I will also say that it's time to ensure that we offer safe and high quality child care for our working families. Right now, folks are at home trying to make it on the stimulus dollars as well as our state EDD. However, there's many families that are still struggling to make it. So for me, a second point of my commitment is to re-energize and reopen our economy. We gotta get back to work, and our folks have to get back to college. They have to be able to potentially look at retraining programs. We need to start working with our workforce partnerships to make sure that there is an opportunity for career retraining. The pandemic has highlighted a lot of inequities in the workplace, and making sure that they have access to new job opportunities and potentially retraining at our local community colleges, and have folks go back to work, go back to school, and ensure that we have safe and reliable childcare are two very important areas for me to be able to reopen our economy.
And so just so I'm clear, the three major issues then are, I wrote down healthcare, the economy, and was the third one childcare, or was childcare a subset of the second one?
Childcare is a subset. I think the last one I will add is we need to refocus our ability to address the issues. And I talk about housing and also homelessness and sheltered as a combined third policy point.
Okay. Thank you. And then obviously the reason that we're having this election is because Shirley Weber has a new position and has left a vacancy here. What part of her record do you most respect? How will you continue her work, and how will you be different in Sacramento?
Yeah. So one of my commitments in running, the state assembly for the 79th, having been raised and gone to public education, for me, I'm a direct beneficiary of many years of investment in public education, having been to all of my education out of all of my primary, middle, and high school. I went to all public education. I'm very proud of that. And I tell that story often because our public education system doesn't get enough credit for having developed and or created folks in the work that we do day in and day out. So as it relates to the 79th, the 79th is a mirror of California. And when you look at the diversity and the potential richness and being able to move our district forward, I think it's absolutely critical. Dr. Weber, Dr. Shirley Weber was my professor when I was a student at San Diego State. She taught my Africana Studies course. So for me, huge amounts of respect, and I acknowledge her volume of contributions, not just as a public elected official, but as a groundbreaking. She was groundbreaking in the work that she did to ensure to highlight issues of criminal justice reform. So I huge amounts of respect for her foundational work. One of the key bills that I believe, she dedicated a lot of time and effort was Assembly Bill 392. And I think for me, it has so many layers of purpose and accountability that is absolutely critical for the current political climate that we're facing today because of all that happened in 2020. Today I stand in support of the George Floyd Justice Policing Act. My team stands in solidarity with the House of Representatives for passing this very critical bill for our country. Police reform and having an honest and frank conversation regarding police reform is something that is very important to me. Not sure if you have additional questions regarding that down in the interview process. I don't want to get ahead of myself too much, but I have, I'd like to share more about that if we have the opportunity down the road, Matthew.
Yeah, and we can get into that. Thank you for keeping the answer brief, Leticia.
Sure, no problem.
Mucho gusto, Leticia. Nice to meet you. And I'm going to take it back to education. Yes. There's been so much confusion, so much talk, open, close, we're going to open on this date. Where do you stand on this issue of reopening the schools, and what would you have done differently if you had the opportunity during this pandemic?
So for me, the issue with school, like I shared in my earlier message, I'm a product of public education, and I always go back to the teachers, the classified employees, and the administrators that are on the ground providing the service. I would have always engaged them in a conversation earlier on, a conversation that was based on data, on science, and making sure that their opinions were being heard. First and foremost, the idea, the tiering effects of when teachers and or school personnel were provided access to the vaccine, based on the levels of priority, I truly believe that they should have been reprioritized earlier on in the process. The idea that they were going to be placed in this public discourse, I think was not appropriate, because at the end of the day, the classified personnel and the teachers and the administrators at our school districts are the ones that are closest to our children, right? And to me, they should have been part of the conversation earlier on. Having said that, the decision to reopen, I will tell you, creates a lot of concern for me because I have my nieces that go to public education. They're both in primary grades. And I will tell you, having been a representative on the ground, I used to be the representative for San Diego Unified when I was with the California School Employees Association. I know I used to regularly do site visits out to schools, north and south of the 8. There's always this dichotomy of discussion regarding services that are rendered south of the 8 and north of the 8. I will just share this with you. I have dedicated 17 years of my life to secure additional funds for public education. And we have done amazing remodels in our schools, right? And I can highlight schools for you that are like the jewels of our community. Lincoln High School, beautiful complex, brand new remodeled, right? And then you can go to, for example, in Assembly District 79, we have Daylord Elementary, nestled in the hills of Del Cerro. We have Patrick Henry High School. We have Pershing. All of those are part of the Assembly District that I'm here in as a candidate for. What I will tell you is that each of these schools have their own challenges to make sure that they have ventilation, that they have the ability to accommodate students 6 feet apart, that our school systems have cleaning, rapid sanitation tools in place. On a given day, every one of our schools maybe has one custodian during the day and maybe 3 during the nighttime to do the nighttime dailies. I want to make sure that our staffing is appropriate to ensure sanitation, cleanliness, and making sure that our students and our staff that are at school sites are taken care of. Have we dedicated enough state budget resources to ensure that each school site has the appropriate custodial staffing allocation? I will defer back to each of the school districts to have those discussions to make sure we have the resources in place and in need, especially in our schools that are heavily attended. Not every school has the same number of students per teacher, and I want to make sure that we have the right staffing to make sure that our students and our school staff have the resources and support that they need. More importantly, are we ready to reopen? I think we need to do an analysis school district by school district. I know that in some districts like Sweetwater Union, their athletic departments have already gone back. Probably today would be like their second week in operation, if I remember reading the press release correctly. So I will tell you that for me, each school district needs to have that conversation with the parents, the faculty, the classified, and the administrators to make sure that they have the right staff in place to be responsive to children coming back. Additionally, I will tell you that I'm really mostly concerned that our special education students are not left behind. They are our students with highest educational needs, where we need to have immediate attention and dedication of resources. We need to catch up, but we also need to do it in a way that we address the anxiety and concerns that parents, teachers, classified, and our students have, because they've been at home for well over a year now. And so we need to be patient, and we need to have a level of support. I truly believe that we need to be able to dedicate additional counseling staff time to the school sites. Our students will need to have an opportunity to dialogue about what this last year has caused them. Whether you call it clinical support or you call it wraparound services, we need to invest in our kids upon their return back to school. It needs to be clean, it needs to be safe, and it needs to be welcoming. We haven't had kids traveling to and from school, and I think we need to be really prepared to reopen.
Thank you.
Have you had the chance to be vaccinated yet? And if so, have you? And if not, do you plan to?
No, Abby, I have not had that vaccine. I do plan on getting it when it's my turn.
What more should the state do to improve public education overall? The Obama administration criticized California for not participating in Race to the Top. In 2007, Stanford University released Getting Down to Facts, one of the largest studies of a state education system ever, that said the main problem isn't resources, but a need to have standards like those that are seen in Massachusetts and New York and New Jersey and Florida and Texas. So what do you say to the idea that one reason California schools may not do as well as they could is because they haven't pursued reforms that have worked elsewhere?
Great question. That's really complicated though. I will tell you that having been an advocate of public education on the classified support side, I will share with you that California took a step in the right direction from my perspective in implementing the local control funding formula. And the reason why I say that is the local control funding formula had 4 elements of direct support. If we're going to have a conversation about education, we need to have a conversation about where the resources are needed the most. Through educational goals and making sure that our students are achieving. I will tell you that I'm not convinced that the standardized tests have been helpful in providing educational access and equity. A local control funding formula was a tool that allowed us to dedicate resources to our English language learners, free and reduced lunch, making sure that we have additional resources for where we have highest level of educational need. I will share with you that the No Child Left Behind and the other educational platforms that were raised, we're incentivizing and we're creating educational methods to teach to a test, not necessarily focusing on the basics of reading, writing, being able to have analytical processes and being able to do being able to communicate, being able to fully develop as students of learning. That is what I have continuously heard when I was attending board meetings at San Diego Unified, at all the other school districts where parents were bringing concerns that their students were being so anxiety driven and being taught to the test that it took away the focus of learning. I wanna encourage us to relook at, are those models the best models to be teaching at the local level? Or can we go back to our educational basics? When I went to school, yes, there was testing, not to the level of testing that I see and emphasis that is placed today. I will tell you, having been a beneficiary of public education, went to City College, San Diego City College. I went to San Diego State, got my bachelor's, and then I went off to law school. My educational pathways came from having great access to great teachers and great classified staff that supported me through some of my most critical times of learning. So I will tell you that teaching to test is not always an indicator of a student's ability to succeed. Thank you for the question.
In 2014, when the local control funding formula was proposed by Governor Brown, it was billed as a way to get resources to poor families and to foster kids. But Dr. Weber and the Legislative Analyst's Office have said for 6 years, 7 years now, that the money is not going directly to help the kids. Instead, it's going often to boost teacher pay or for general district operations. In 2016, the then Superintendent of Public Education said that's just fine. So I'm not sure I've ever heard someone declare that the LCFF has worked before, because the criticism from Dr. Weber and the LAO is that no, not only hasn't it worked, it was sold as something that wasn't.
Well, I will say from the perspective of being on the ground, my perspective in seeing how the school districts have allocated the resources, the 4 areas of highest need in our students, The one element that I would concur in your statement, sir, is that there has to be a better way to respond to where the resource, there was no tracking and there was no accountability. That's what I do agree needed to have been included in the first distribution and implementation of the LCFF. I will tell you that the LCFF in its truest form had different stakeholder participation that required districts to engage parents and other individuals that were helping in implementing the goals that were dedicated within the LCFF. That one piece, I do agree with you that there should have been more accountability to how resources were being used. That I agree with you. However, my perspective in the LCFF in meeting the needs of our most neediest students, I believe that was the beginning of this new framework that actually dedicated resources to our schools that had highest levels of need. And I stand with that methodology because our children that are impacted, we have seen results at the local level.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
The teachers' unions play a big role in a lot of this, whether it's the return to class or anything else affecting how the teachers teach their students. And I'm wondering, our letter writers have expressed both support for the unions, and they've also expressed opposition to the amount of political weight that they wield in the state. I wonder, how do you work? How would you work with the unions? And do you think they do a good job both for the teachers and for the students?
I will respond to the last portion of your question first. Yes, I do believe. Yes, I do believe that it's critical that every stakeholder is considered, right? The way that the discourse occurred in early January, early February, where the decision to reopen, right? And the Governor Newsom attaching additional resources to incentivize an earlier return. Do you recall that? That dialogue, that discourse created what I believe is a wedge in having the full discussion with the administration at the school district, the teachers, our classified, our parents, and our students. It's absolutely critical that everybody's on the same page. Safety should be our #1 priority, and identifying a date to return. That conversation was happening with not everybody at the table, looking at the objectives of focusing on reopening and what's in the best interest of our students. And so I do believe that that conversation needs to include all stakeholders. And I do believe that the teachers in particular, who are responsible for the day-to-day educational goals and delivery of that educational plan to their students, should have been consulted earlier on. I'm going to ask Andrew, I don't think I answered the first part of your question.
Basically, it pertains to the amount of power that the unions wield in the state politically. I'm wondering, are they powerful, and does that interfere with their role as being the union for the teachers?
So my perspective today I serve in the position of a business representative. Previously, I held the position of a organizer, a labor representative, and a field director with organized labor. I think for me, what's important in my story is that advocating on behalf of workers that live in our community that are part of the 79th, I will share with you, uplifting working families and creating a better future for all. It is something that I know it's at the core of our teachers, our classified, and our administrators. I think it's important that the narrative is a teachers union like CTA or Classified School Employees Association that represents the classified employees at a school district. It's the best interest of the students and their community. When you look at their mission statement, that is in fact a piece of their mission statement for each of their respective organizations. What I will say to you is this, is that there has to be an opportunity to advocate. In this discussion, a month ago, 2 months ago, the issue of teachers having access to vaccine was not even occurring. So now we're at a whole different place. Move the clock forward. Teachers, paraeducators, custodians are in the process of getting the vaccine. I know personal friends that work in education that just got their vaccine. That's vaccine first vaccine, right? And so for me, I think we're on our way. Things are moving and we're on track to making sure that each school district makes a decision to reopen in a safe manner. I want to emphasize it. We have to proceed with data and ensure that there's safety plans in place. Like I said to you, I really want to make sure that we have the correct staffing to ensure that our cleaning objectives of rapid sanitation are present, because we're going to have to manage the virus and got to make sure that we have response plans for potential issues of transmission at local sites.
What are your ideas to bring down the cost of housing?
That's a really loaded question, Christy. I will share with you that I was doing research for the debate that I had last night, and I will tell you that supply is my answer. We need to increase supply, and we need to be able to relook at the type of housing that's being built, right? We saw some movement recently where they were allowing for multiple dwellings on a land piece, right? I think we need to look at supply. To answer your question briefly, I think it's supply, and I think there has to be elements of affordability depending on area median income.
Has the pandemic changed your thinking at all on housing or transportation?
Absolutely.
Can you elaborate?
Well, I will share with you, as I shared in the beginning, that having been the representative for the city of San Diego, city of Coronado, the blue collar unit, the members that I'm proudly representing, a couple thousand of workers, they actually have not had the luxury to work. They're not able to telework. These are frontline essential service employees that report every day to a location. They didn't have the luxury of being able to be home. We saw the impacts to transportation. The freeways were fairly empty. But I will say this, housing, the need for housing is critical, but I would ask, and I would look to creating affordable housing nearest to our highways, entry points. You know, when you look at developments, you know, I live in Chula Vista, and there's housing stopped for a period of time, but you see the robust growing developments that are happening on East Olympic Parkway. And that growth didn't stop during the pandemic. It might have been a couple months where there was no construction, but it's booming. And I will tell you that when I look at the Assembly District 79, we have to create housing opportunities and housing options closest to our highways and also closest to our public transportation arteries to make sure we limit the impact to traffic flow, as well as increase the ability to have housing points nearest to our public transportation, whether it's the trolley or MTS bus lines.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Leticia, I want to get into some of the criminal justice issues, but before that, a quick follow-up, if you could be brief. What thoughts on CEQA and whether that law should be reformed to speed the way for more housing supply, or if you think that the law works as is?
I'm gonna have to take, I need to look more into it, Matthew. I don't have enough to give you a quick response. I need to look into CEQA. I don't know if you have something I could read quickly. I can take a look at it, but I'm not comfortable in responding without having more information.
Okay, fair. Housing affordability, a quick follow-up on that too. Affordable housing can mean subsidized housing, which is really, really expensive, helps a relatively few Californians. So I guess my quick follow-up question for you is, what do you think of that approach in terms of housing? And is your focus on that in terms of growing the supply in that specific area, or do you allow market forces to work and to facilitate that?
So this is the thing, Matthew, when I look at part of my, I don't know if you have my bio, but part of my bio is I dedicated several years of my early career in my 20s, and I was doing community organizing, securing affordable housing. I was under the community development department with the MAC project here in San Diego. And I'm the concept of developing affordable housing that's inclusionary, I think to me is critical. To answer your first question first, when I read the reports, and I have read them, it indicated to San Diego County that there was a need for 170,000 homes. And that had a huge variance of economic need, right? From affordable housing, as you indicated, but also for working professionals. I met a couple walking, I was doing precinct walking to try to get my name out there. Met a professional set of engineers, both of them graduates, both of them working. They needed to earn collectively $220,000 a year to be able to buy a home in La Mesa. I can't afford to buy a home in La Mesa based on what I'm making here today, okay? So I'm looking for affordable housing that is available for working professionals. We have to have options for them to stay in San Diego and not be costed out of their ability to purchase.
Thank you for those quick follow-ups. And switching to law enforcement, you mentioned George Floyd, obviously the officer most responsible in that group for his death. His trial is beginning this week.
Yes.
Country's been talking about this since May and June. What specific policy changes do you support after all of last year and this year's racial justice reckoning?
Well, you know, as a labor leader, as a social justice activist, I have participated in every social action involving justice for George Floyd. I participated in justice for Breonna Taylor. I personally shared the loss of Mr. Arbery, Ahmaud Arbery. The levels of human capital that have been impacted by the excess use of force is prevalent. My commitment as an assembly member is to make sure that everyone is part of the conversation. Social and criminal justice reform is necessary. 2020 has created that awareness. We need to be able to have a conversation with law enforcement and law enforcement leadership. Change is necessary. How we go about that change needs to include everyone at the table. When you ask me, what are the things, what am I looking to specifically? We have to look at processes involving the protocols of decertification. We need to look at creating statewide national database. We need to be able to look at the work that a law professional, police officer professional, we need to look at how do we implement crisis teams to offset the situation involving if there's an individual potentially having a mental crisis where they are in higher need of clinical support. I know other cities have implemented different models that are responsive to individuals that may be having a crisis that render them therapeutic clinical support on the spot, where the dynamics have changed from officer-involved shootings to more of clinical support. That's a rededication of a response. A couple weeks ago, I did the Voice of San Diego forum, and I was asked the question. And if you remember, or if you watch the tape, I was kind of the last one to answer. I was running out of time. I will share with you that I propose a 5-element component, right, of areas to look at as options to where do we start the conversation. I shared with you the crisis teams. I shared the dedication of a landline it's not comparative to a 911, but it's another type of a response number that we would roll out where there is an opportunity to have not the police response, but have a clinical team respond to be able to triangulate and assess a situation. A social worker, a clinical therapist, somebody that has the capacity to do intervention that's culturally competent, bilingual resources. This is very important to me because of an incident that my family and I had to endure many, many, many years ago, right? So I come to you as a candidate for the 79th, but also from having experience where there's a breach of trust with law enforcement. So my experience in this area is rooted in an area where we need to have change. Change is necessary. And so there's a lot more that I can say to this, but you said briefly respond. So I think that I have given you probably about 5 areas that I would look at because I truly believe that we must do better moving forward.
I appreciate the specificity of that. And if you could also, let me just ask you on a couple areas of Weber's interest, where you stand.
Sure.
Real quickly, kind of yes or no support. Affirmative action, Prop 16 measure, did you support that?
I'm sorry, somebody's on the chat. Yes.
Okay. And
Support
her
affirmative action, yes.
Thank you. Her reparations task force review and reparations in general for African Americans?
Yeah, yes, I supported, and I'm very thankful that Council Member Monica Montgomery Stepp is one of the appointees, as well as Senator Bradford, both who I've not only looked to, but I look forward to their work on the reparations committee.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Should candidates take money from police unions? Are Democrats too tight with police unions?
Is that 2 questions or 1?
2 questions. In general, should candidates take money from police unions? And the second, looking at California's recent history, do you think that there's a problem there with Democrats being affiliated with police unions that almost always resist change?
Well, I see those 2 differently. So I'm going to answer yes. I'm going to answer yes. Law enforcement is an association like any other organized group. The other part, I think your second question, I have a different perspective on it, sir, because of what I recently experienced here with the San Diego Democratic Party. So my perspective is slightly different.
Could you explain, please?
Well, I sure can. You know, the vacancy of this position was made, I believe it was, I know that I personally declared my candidacy in the Assembly 79th in early January. The decision by the local Democratic Party to place the endorsement on their agenda involved utilizing appointees that were put in office in the position of ADEMs, that's what they're called, right? ADEM individuals who were elected 2 elections ago, right? So I paid the State Democratic Party for the list. I personally called individuals on the list and asked for an opportunity to present my reasonings for why I was running. When I took back and took a look at the list, they had been appointed by, at that time was Assembly Member Dr. Shirley Weber, and at that point was Senator Atkins. So their appointees were already pre-designated on that list. So I called them, I introduced myself, I, in some instances, had conversations with them. So for me, I was very concerned that even before the actual vote took place, there was already predetermination of alignments having been made already. Obviously, they were not in my favor. If you look at the vote, it went towards the primary candidate, and then it was one person who was an ADEM who voted for themselves. And so for me, I had really amounts of concern that the way that the structure is set, it's not inclusive. It wasn't democratic. There wasn't an opportunity to have meaningful dialogue regarding my candidacy, and the decision was made even before the vote was taken. And so for me, I have a severe amounts of concern about the party being really open to having new candidates enter this race. Like I said, it just seemed like decisions were made before my cause were even placed. Thank you for the question.
Let me jump to a climate change question. What do you think the state should be doing to limit the financial and environmental damage that climate change is causing, particularly in regards to wildfires in your district?
Well, I definitely support the climate change plan. I will tell you that we have to ensure that we plan ahead, secure resources. The issue with the fires, I want to tell you that I was very supportive of our California insurance commissioner. When, last year around May or so, we got those rebates back from, all of us got rebates because we were not traveling, we were not on the road. What I will share with you is that I truly believe that we need to have a more aggressive approach in protecting our green space involving fires. I truly believe that we need to be able to protect our natural habitat. We need to be able to plan ahead and ensure that we leave an environment for future generations to come. These are precious resources, and we need to be able to have dedicated resources to have the fire department and resources team to be responsive. I worry that this last fire season, there did not appear to be enough of an infrastructure set to support our firefighters that were on the front lines trying to help contain the multiple wildfires that our state faced.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and go back to the pandemic for a moment, if I could, and ask about your district would include parts of Bonita, Chula Vista, National City, which in themselves are very different. The South Bay has been hit so hard during this pandemic with a lot of disparities. What would you do? What would you do, and what would you have done differently given what we've seen unfold?
Thank you, Laura. I think for me, the issues involving the pandemic and how it's really shown how our communities of greater need have had disparities of access, right? So first, the issue was with access to healthcare, being able to access testing. That was the first barrier. And I'll still share this. The issue with access in our communities of color or communities of greater need, I look to, one of the communities in Assembly District 79 is National City. Prior to the pandemic, we were already hit with severe amounts of concerns in the community. And I will share this, the pandemic only made the needs greater and highlighted it in a more broader way. I know that the county leadership through the County Board of Supervisors, in the Chula Vista, National City, San Isidro area, you have County Board of Supervisor Nora Vargas, who has supported me in the race. I will share that under the leadership of County Board of Supervisor Nathan Fletcher, their rapid efforts to try to create pods and super stations is something that I know the community has really greatly appreciated in taking the vaccine out into the community. I think those are commendable approaches. However, I will share this. One of the areas that I went into quick action to help our community was myself take it upon myself to go on to and schedule appointments for seniors that were in highest need, that were in my immediate, either folks that I knew, members that I had when I say members, I meant union members that I used to be able to represent that are still friends. I had the ability to have a home computer where I have Wi-Fi, where I'm able to be of service. I took the leadership and registered people for vaccines at Petco Park, at the Chula Vista station, right? Went into action, right? To make sure that we were able to create those, connect folks with highest level of need. Today, and I gave you the example of National City because I have somebody who was in frail health who didn't have an iPad or a computer, nor even what they call a smartphone. They have the traditional old school phone, right? They couldn't go on and look up the appointments. It took a bit of number of steps to even do it when I did it for my mom. And I will tell you that bridging that gap of infrastructure of hardware, software is something that cannot be taken for granted as we move through this pandemic. Our communities of highest need don't have the accessibility of computers, of our ability to connect to these portals, right? I do believe that the concept of having navigators, community navigators, helping communities of color is something we need to expand resources in. I call them navigators. I think some organizations call them promotoras, where folks are equally equipped in English and Spanish to bridge that need. I signed up my mom for her vaccine, and I will tell you, I'm going to give credit to Family Health Clinic in Mount Hope, who was able to give my mom her vaccine. My mom is over 74 years old, right? I'm thankful for the clinic that provided that community outreach and service there in our Mount Hope community, which is where my mom lives today. I will share with you that had it not been for that quick access of service point from that family clinic, I'm not sure how it would have taken. So I helped members sign up members at Petco Park, and my mom went to her local family clinic, and I'm thankful for that. But I will tell you that there's communities to this day that still have not been able to get an appointment. I ask folks, I'm always available to help people as a way to connect that gap. I was precinct walking this weekend and getting my message out in Lemon Grove. There's a lot of infrastructure issues there where folks are not accessing the vaccine. So I don't believe it's a problem that's isolated just to National City, but I believe it's an infrastructure issue where we have to create more on the ground messaging and making it safe for community members to access the vaccine. I think folks who come forward and tell their story of why it's important, put the information out there and have folks feel safe in bridging that cultural gap of accepting the vaccine if that's what they choose.
Can I just ask you really quickly if you could answer, very, very briefly in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, not to point the finger at anybody because this is a huge effort, but where do you think, what body, what entity didn't do enough? Like what?
Well, I said this in the Voice of San Diego. I believe I was asked there, but I'll repeat it again. I really believe that we should have used our military facilities. I think we should have deployed our military. I believe that it should have been our military resources. We have Miramar, we have Coronado, we have the Naval Hospital. Why didn't we engage our already prepared, trained medics to go out into our communities? I'm going to give a shout out to the Chula Vista firefighters who took it upon themselves under the leadership of Daryl Roberts to go and take the vaccine to our most elderly, vulnerable population. They literally they went out in the community and started to implement the vaccine where folks could not, because of their medical state, they were unable to travel. Kudos to them for stepping in and bridging that gap of healthcare.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
How would you evaluate Governor Gavin Newsom's performance?
Is there a specific, Christy, a specific area, or is it just in totality?
Really just overall.
I believe he's doing great work. He's faced a pandemic, and I think that from every possible angle you look at the situation, there was huge amounts of limitations. until we had the change in national leadership. And I believe he did the best he could with the resources that he had and the ability to mobilize our county supervisors through the distribution of the vaccine. I think from that perspective, things were difficult, and it took a while to change over leadership in the month of January. I think things are better today. I know that's been a lot placed before him. One of the key areas that I shared with Matthew, from my perspective, is we have to reopen the economy and get our folks back to work. So it's been a difficult time for everyone serving.
Who do you look up to? What Democratic leaders do you admire, both locally and nationally?
Thank you for the question. So, I take a lot of solace in looking at our president, Joe Biden, his spouse, who is a community college professor. I shared my story about having gone to community college. I believe public education and higher education opens many doors to all of us. So Joe Biden, I look to. I look to President Obama and Michelle Obama, who gave us a focus in our country when we needed it the most. I look to Marilena Durazo, Senator Marilena Durazo, who I met many years ago in LA. She was at the time working for the LA Fed, the LA Federation of Labor, and the course of her leadership now with the Latino Caucus. For purposes of transparency, the Latino Caucus has endorsed me in this race. And for me, it's very humbling that I'm able to be in the race as a daughter of immigrant parents from Mexico. Locally, I look to the courage of Assemblymember Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, a champion for our labor families. I look to Nora Vargas, the first immigrant supervisor to be on the County Board of Supervisors. She's also a dear friend for purposes of transparency as well. We've known each other since we were in our 20s. The first Latina, the first immigrant voice on the County Board of Supervisors. It is a very difficult time to lead. It's rapid fire, making sure that COVID information is out and making sure that it's reaching our communities on the ground has been critical. So I look to them for their leadership and guidance. I will also say that there's a lot of local leadership that I look to as well. Andreas Young asked me District Council 36 president. He shoulders the responsibility to move over 70 municipalities, county municipality employer groups forward. This is a critical time for us to be representing workers when resources are limited. Sorry, Chris, I could go on and on, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. I want to follow up on the subject of economic recovery. How do you balance both the obvious health and safety concerns with your commitment to, bringing people back to work? And then as a follow-up, outside of the pandemic, I'm curious what you think would be something you would do or something that needs to improve on the economic level for your district.
Thank you. So Abby, I think for me, every response I've provided, I think for me, we have to get ahead as it relates to COVID-19 testing vaccines. I have to put that in that context, right? We need to be able to make it available, make sure the vaccine is being rolled out. I want to make sure that in every step we take that we reopen the economy safely. From the San Diego perspective, our tourism needs to reopen. I will share with you that as a business representative with the city of San Diego, our local 127 members have been promised and they have deferred multiple years of any kind of cost of living increase. Our workers have not seen a dollar materialized. Last year, when they were at the bargaining table, they were promised a 3.05% salary increase just to do a cost of living. And the mayor at the time rescinded that offer midway through bargaining. And so that offer was pulled off the table. At the time, we were dealing with COVID implementation and trying to keep everybody safe. That was about March of last year. Now we're at the table again for this bargaining cycle. No, there's no commitment of resources until the local economy through the TOT dollars gets where we see it, we start seeing a surge in tourism again. That's where most of the resources come in, is through our tourism and our hotel industry here in San Diego, as I referenced earlier, with the economy here at Harbor Drive and across the way into Coronado. So you asked, what would I do, right? What would be some of the policy work that I would look at? We need jobs. We need to incentivize companies to coming back either to Southern California or to California in general. You know, we're the 5th largest economy in California. We need to be able to work and incentivize the startup companies, and being able to create jobs is critical in our economy, especially as we get through the pandemic. So I will tell you that we need to look at creating job programs. The pandemic showed us where the work has now changed. We've seen massive amounts of different small businesses close up shop, right? So I truly believe that in moving past this pandemic and how resources are allocated, I'm committed as an assembly member in the 79th to look at small businesses, micro entrepreneurship. How can we support and refurbish the opportunity for minority-owned businesses to have an opportunity to create small business ventures in their community? I would refocus on creating opportunities for women businesses, Latino X businesses, being able to afford where we have an opportunity to be creative in how we use our local dollars in reinvesting in our local community. I also would look at, you say what other jobs, right? For me, we need to look at reinvesting in shovel-ready capital projects. Where is it that we have construction projects that have been left incomplete because of COVID? Where can we pick up that opportunity to have folks back getting ready to do the work? My big focus would be to ensure that, I mentioned it earlier, which is we need to be able to provide safe and high quality childcare services. So we are able to deploy folks back to work, but ensure that their children have safe and reliable childcare services. With that, Abby, I would say that we need to look at, I know that Southwestern College, which is in Assembly District 79, they were looking at reopening community colleges, right? They also, we would look at making sure that they look at the jobs of the future. The jobs that were there in 2020, are those the same jobs that are going to guarantee jobs for the future generations of college students, as well as like our California State University students? I have my nephew goes to UCSD and my other nephew goes to SDSU. They have had a really difficult experience because they're used to being in classes. They're used to being with their colleagues and students learning at labs. They haven't had that opportunity. So figuring out how we're going to re-implement our students back into higher education, I think it's another area that I would focus in and provide resources of support.
Thanks, Leticia. And I'm going to give you a chance for a closing statement in a second, but I just had one follow-up question. If you want to share, you kind of referenced a family situation with law enforcement that guides some of your thinking. Can you share that with us?
Yeah. So Matthew, when are you thinking about placing this recording public? I'm curious about timing.
After we have interviewed all the candidates.
Do you have an estimate of that date?
Wednesday is our last interview.
Oh, this week?
Correct.
Okay. So to me, the proposals that I shared with you, the different elements of how I reconsider like envisioning law enforcement, it's because of a personal experience that we had when I was a child. And it involved, reaching out to police for help. And there was a breach of that trust. I will share with you that when I relook at the facts, I was a child then, right? When I relook at what transpired, I know some things that were very critical. Clinical help, a response would have been helpful. I think it would have changed the course of what happened during that interaction with the police. I also believe that language sensitivity is very important when you're dealing in a crisis situation. So I do believe that in looking at crisis teams, they have to include the responders need to be like language culturally sensitive. And in this case, I would say ultimately various languages, but more importantly, in our instance, it would have been Spanish. I would also say that the designation of an alternative number to a 911, I think that the reason why I proposed that is because I truly believe that our interaction with the police would have been different. At this point, what I will say is that my commitment in having, as a social justice advocate, for me, I truly believe that having everyone in the conversation is absolutely critical to be able to create meaningful progress and change as we look at reimagining what policing will look like in years to come.
Thank you for elaborating a little bit. Any other questions?
I have one. Yeah, so you mentioned earlier that you said you think the teachers should have been teachers and education workers should have been more deeply included in the question about prioritizing vaccination and should have been placed at a higher priority. So I have a two-part question, and one is the CDC has said that although vaccination for education workers is important but not necessary to reopen. Do you agree or disagree with that? And the second part is, should all educators be vaccinated at the same priority, or should those teaching in person already be prioritized for those shots?
So I will respond to number one, vaccination need to be voluntary, first and foremost. Each individual has their own medical history. And so I think it definitely needs to be voluntary, definitely as a priority for the in-person classroom educational teaching. Can you repeat your first question, Deborah?
Sorry, the question was, the CDC had said that while vaccinating teachers and school staff is important, it isn't necessary for returning to school, that schools can safely reopen if they follow other steps such as social distancing, face coverings, sanitation of classrooms and so forth. So my question is, do you think that schools should wait to reopen until after all vaccination campaigns of workers are completed, or do you think they can, do you agree with the CDC that they can start opening now as they're rolling out the vaccination?
So this is, I'm only going to go with the information that I'm aware of. I believe it has to be several components in place. I truly believe that vaccinations need to be offered. Number two, we still need to continue to use PPE. And number three, I shared that with one of your colleagues who asked the question. I want to make sure that there's an allocation of resources for rapid sanitation. I will tell you that as I looked at the custodial allocation, I don't necessarily know that our school districts are prepared to have enough staffing to be able to also render their daily work in addition to rapid sanitation. There really isn't extra minutes for cleaning as it is through their staffing formulas. So I would say we have to allocate enough resources and staffing to make sure that rapid sanitation is occurring. So I think it has to be a comprehensive approach, Deborah. I don't believe that it's one or the other. And I will say that I think it's absolutely critical that our teachers and our classified and our students and families are offered the vaccine. But I do believe that there's a way to do a hybrid model of return. for in-classroom, you know, as some districts are considering reopening for in-classroom, and also others are doing remote education still via digital work.
Okay, thank you.
Just to be clear, you said parents and students should get the vaccine. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, that's forthcoming, right? I think that's coming. I don't believe that when I mean students like my nephews, right, that they're in college, they're college age. So not necessarily our elementary, middle, or high school.
As part of the process, you mean? Okay.
Yeah,
Any-
the total, right,
Thank you.
distribution.
Any other questions? Seeing none, why don't you take 30 seconds and we're going to try to hold you to it. As a
30
closing statement.
seconds, Matthew, that's not very generous.
Yeah, let us know why voters should pick you.
Okay, well, I just want to thank the San Diego Union-Tribune Editorial Board. Being a child of being raised here in San Diego, being available and seeing the paper, what an opportunity to be here before you today and sharing my story and my journey to the State Assembly. I'm a candidate in the State Assembly. I'm ready to serve our community, as I shared earlier. The State Assembly District 79 mirrors the richness of our diversity and our opportunity. And it's absolutely critical for me that we get our folks back to work and that we provide access to our community to testing, vaccines, being able to render affordable housing to our families in most need. I will share with you that as we get ready to get ballots at our home, I am your first option on the ballot, Leticia Munguia for the State Assembly, first option on your ballot, a lifetime Democrat committee. I'm committed to serving our community and being your voice in Sacramento and a champion to ensure that we get our economy back on track. I thank you in advance for your consideration, and I thank you all on the editorial board for allowing me to share my story. We have 39 days to go, April the 6th. Make sure your ballot is back in the mail. Thank you for your consideration. Leticia Munguia for the Assembly.
Thank you very much for taking the time today. I appreciate it talking to you.
Thank you. I appreciate
care.
your time. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.